The cantina on Nexus 7 was the kind of place where broken soldiers went to forget. Smoke hung thick in the air, mixing the bitter smell of synthetic alcohol with the metallic scent of old blood and older regrets. Neon lights flickered against scarred walls, casting shadows that seemed to move with their own dark memories. In the darkest corner, Vexamor sat alone. The Thracian warrior was a giant among giants, his massive frame hunched over a table that groaned under his weight. Arms each as thick as a tree trunk rested on the stained surface. Two of those arms weren't the original ones he'd been born with. The cybernetic replacements gleamed with a cold blue light, their metal surfaces etched with battle scars and plasma burns. His compound eyes, once bright yellow, now held the dull glow of someone who had seen too much and lived too long. The bartender, a six-legged Krillian with nervous antennae, kept glancing at Vexamor's table. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone knew what those metal arms meant. The Thracian had lost his original limbs in the Void Wars, fighting alongside the most dangerous species in the galaxy, humans. The cantina's usual crowd gave him a wide berth. Pirates, smugglers, and mercenaries all found other places to sit. But tonight was different. Tonight, 3 young recruits had stumbled into the cantina, their uniforms still crisp, their eyes still bright with the foolish courage of youth. The first was a Zephyrian, his blue skin unmarked by battle, his silver hair still perfectly groomed. His name was Colliner, fresh from the academy. The second was a reptilian saurian called Thresh, his scales gleaming green and gold, his tail twitching with nervous energy. The third was a crystalline being named Luz, her transparent body pulsing with soft light, betraying her excitement. They whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the legendary veteran. The alcohol in their systems made them braver than they should have been. "Go on," Thresh hissed to his companions. "Ask him. We'll never get another chance." Kolnor swallowed hard, his throat making a clicking sound. "You do it, Luz. Your people are supposed to be wise." "Wisdom means knowing when not to disturb sleeping monsters," Les replied, her voice like wind chimes in a storm, but curiosity won over caution. The 3 recruits approached Vexamor's table, their footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet that fell over the cantina. Other patrons turned to watch, sensing drama in the air. Veteran Vexamor Colliner spoke first, his voice cracking slightly. "We've heard stories about your service with the humans during the Void Wars. Tell us, are they really as dangerous as the legends say?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vexamor didn't move for a long moment. His cybernetic arms whirred softly as he lifted his glass, a massive thing that would have been a pitcher for smaller species. The liquid inside was thick and dark. It's probably something that would kill any of the 3 recruits with a single sip, his compound eyes fixed on them. And the recruits felt like insects under a microscope. When he finally spoke, his voice was like gravel grinding against stone. "Dangerous?" The word came out as a low growl. "You young fools don't understand the word. You think dangerous is a plasma cannon or a fusion bomb. You think dangerous is a fleet of warships or a squad of battle mechs." He took another drink, and the recruits waited, hardly breathing. "I was there when we thought we'd crush them easily. The Great Coalition, they called us. 12 species, each one proud of their military might. The Krillians, with their hive mind tactics. The Zephyrians, with their speed and grace. The Saurians, with their brutal strength. The Crystallins, with their energy weapons. My people, the Thracians, with our 4-armed combat superiority." Vexamor's metal fingers drummed against the table, creating a rhythm like a war drum. "We found them on mining colony, Delta 7, a small human garrison, maybe 200 soldiers. We had 10,000 warriors, backed by orbital support and assault mechs. The humans had basic weapons, limited supplies, and no way to escape. We outnumbered them, 50 to 1. The recruits leaned forward, captivated despite their fear. Our commanders were already planning victory celebrations. Some were placing bets on how quickly the humans would surrender. Smart money was on. Less than 6 hours? After all, what rational being would fight against such impossible odds? Vexamor's laugh was bitter and cold. That's when I learned my first lesson about humans. They're not rational, not in the way we understand it, he said. Down his glass and stared into its depths. I was part of the advanced scout team. We were supposed to observe their defenses, count their weapons, assess their morale. Instead, I watched something that chilled me to my core. The cantina had gone completely silent now. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses. The humans knew we were coming, at maybe 12 hours before our main force arrived. Any other species would have used that time to build defenses, call for reinforcements, or prepare to surrender. But not the humans. Vexamer's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. I watched human soldiers prepare for what should have been their certain death. Corporal Heianwu, a young man barely out of his teens, was checking his weapon for the 100th time. Private Ji Hai, a small woman who looked like she should have been teaching children instead of fighting wars, was distributing ammunition to her squad. He paused, his metal fingers clenching into fists. But instead of fear, instead of despair, they were singing ancient war songs from their homeworld. Songs about honor and sacrifice and dying for something greater than themselves, and they were smiling. The recruits exchanged glances, confusion clear on their faces. I didn't understand. Then, Vexamer continued. How could they smile when facing annihilation? How could they sing when death was marching toward them with unstoppable force? He looked up at the three young soldiers, his compound eyes reflecting the cantina's neon lights. That's when I knew we weren't fighting normal beings. We were about to face something that found joy in the face of annihilation. Something that became more dangerous the more hopeless their situation became. Vexamor raised his glass in a mock toast. To the humans, he said. The only species in the galaxy that get stronger when they should get weaker. The only beings who smile when they should scream. The recruits sat in stunned silence, beginning to understand that the stories they'd heard weren't legends at all. They were warnings. The siege lasted 14 rotations, each one longer than the last. Vexamer's voice grew heavier with each word, like he was carrying the weight of those memories on his massive shoulders. The three recruits sat frozen, their drinks forgotten, as the veteran's tale unfolded. We expected them to surrender by the third day, Vexamor continued, his cybernetic fingers tapping against the table in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Our orbital bombardment had knocked out their main power grid. A communication array was smoking rubble. Their landing pad was a crater. Any rational species would have raised the white flag. He paused to take another drink, the thick liquid coating his throat like oil. But humans aren't rational. On the fourth day, instead of surrender signals, we started getting something else. Reports from our frontline troops about impossible things. Soldiers getting hit by debris that moved like guided missiles. Communication systems failing in ways that made no sense. Equipment malfunctioning in patterns that seemed almost intelligent. Thresh, the young Saurian, leaned forward. Do you mean intelligent? Vexamor's compound eyes focused on him with laser intensity. Lieutenant Minho, their engineering officer, young man maybe 25 Earth years old, looked like he should have been fixing hover cars, not fighting wars. But that human had a mind like a quantum computer. The veteran gestured with one of his cybernetic arms. The metal joints worried softly. He'd figured out that our armor was designed to handle direct energy weapons and explosive impacts, but it wasn't built to handle constant pressure from multiple directions. So he started venting atmosphere from different sectors of the colony, creating projectile streams that could punch through our best protection like it was paper. Koliner, the Zephyrian recruit, shook his head in disbelief. Atmosphere? As a weapon? Everything became a weapon in human hands, Vexamer replied grimly. Their mining equipment turned into artillery. Their water recycling systems became pressure bombs. Their waste disposal units became chemical launchers. That colony wasn't just their home anymore. It was their body, and every part of it could kill you. The cantina seemed to grow colder as he spoke, the other patrons listening from their tables with growing unease. But the real genius was Medic Youngji, small woman, quiet voice, always smiling when she treated patients. She looked like she couldn't hurt a fly. During our brief ceasefires, she'd come out under the medical flags to help our wounded. Perfect bedside manner, gentle hands, spoke our languages fluently. Vexamer's voice took on an edge of admiration mixed with terror. What we didn't know was that every time she treated one of our soldiers, she was learning. Every scan she ran, every medicine she administered, every question she asked about our physiology, she was gathering intelligence. Luz the crystalline, being pulsed with nervous light. Intelligence for what? She reprogrammed their medical nanobots, Vexamer said simply. Microscopic machines designed to heal human injuries. In her hands, they became the perfect infiltration system. Those nanobots could mimic our own communication frequencies, slip past our security systems, and nest in our equipment like electronic parasites. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances as the implications sank in. Our commanders started receiving false orders. Our weapons would jam at critical moments. Our shield generators would overload during attacks. And all the while, that sweet medic would smile and ask if we needed anything for our pain. Vexamer leaned back in his chair, the metal creaking under his weight. But it was Sergeant Hayone who truly terrified me. She was their chemical specialist. Trained in food production and environmental systems. During the day, she was an angel of mercy. When we called ceasefires to collect our dead, she'd be there with medical supplies, water, even food for our wounded. She'd sit with dying soldiers, holding their hands, speaking softly in their native languages. His voice dropped too barely above a whisper. By night she was death itself. Those same gentle hands that comforted our wounded were converting their food processing plants into chemical weapon factories. She knew exactly how each of our species breathed, what gases would incapacitate us, what compounds would make us hallucinate, what mixtures would make our own biology turn against us. The recruits sat in stunned silence, trying to process the horror of what they were hearing. I watched her work once through our long-range scopes. She moved through their converted factories like a dancer, mixing compounds with the precision of an artist, and all the while, she was humming. Lullabies while she created weapons that could kill thousands. Vexamor's compound eyes clouded with a mixture of respect and horror. That's when I realized something that still keeps me awake at night. Humans don't separate their capacity for mercy from their ability to destroy. For them, they're the same. Terrifying emotion. They kill you because they love something else more than they fear taking your life. He leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. The worst part wasn't the weapons or the traps or the impossible tactics. It was when they started broadcasting final messages from their fallen comrades. Not to demoralize us, but to remind their own forces what they were fighting for. The cantina fell completely silent. Private Kim, barely 18 years old, had taken shrapnel to the chest during our 7th assault. As he died, he recorded a message to his unit. "Remember my mom's cooking," he said. "Remember the sunset over the wheat fields? Remember why we're here?" Then he smiled and closed his eyes forever. Vexamer's voice cracked slightly. They played that message every morning at sunrise and every evening at sunset. And before every battle, and their soldiers didn't break. They didn't weep, got angry. Righteously, terrifyingly angry. The veteran took another drink, his hands shaking almost imperceptibly. They used their own dead as fuel for their living. Every fallen comrade became a reason to fight harder. Every loss became strength. Every tragedy became motivation. I've seen warriors from 100 species, but I've never seen anything like human grief transformed into purpose. Thresh swallowed hard, his scales rippling with nervous energy. "How did you survive?" Vexamer looked at his cybernetic arms, the metal reflecting the candlelight like mirrors. "That's a story for another drink," he said quietly. "But I'll tell you this much. When humans decide you're their enemy, they don't just want to defeat you. They want to become better than you at everything you thought you were good at. And they will, every single time." The 3 recruits sat in the growing darkness, beginning to understand why veterans like Vexamer drank alone, and why the galaxy's toughest warriors avoided talking about the Void Wars. Outside the cantina, the Space Station hummed with life, unaware that somewhere in the depths of the galaxy, humans were still out there, still smiling, still singing their ancient songs. Then came the counteroffensive. Vexamor's voice turned grim, like he was remembering a nightmare that had never truly ended. The three recruits could see his cybernetic arms trembling slightly, the metal fingers creating small scratches on the table's surface. "We thought we knew warfare," he continued, his compound eyes distant with memory. "For 10 rotations, we had pushed them back, sector by sector. Their colony was burning. Their people were dying. We controlled the orbital space around the planet." Victory seemed certain. He traced patterns on the table with a metal finger, drawing invisible maps of battles long past. That's when Captain Doyen appeared. 28 years old, average. Height. Unremarkable face. The kind of human you'd walk past without a second glance. Our intelligence files said he was just another junior officer, probably assigned to the colony because he wasn't good enough for real combat. Vexamor's laugh was hollow and bitter. We were so wrong it almost cost us everything. The human could predict our movements before we made them. Not with technology or artificial intelligence, but with pure observation and intuition. He watched our patrol patterns for 3 days, then sent us detailed schedules of where every one of our units would be for the next week. And he was right. Down to the minute. The thresh. The young Saurian leaned forward. "That's impossible. No organic mind can process that much tactical data." "That's what we thought," Vexamor replied. But Captain Duyan didn't just process data. He understood us better than we understood ourselves. He studied our biology, our psychology, our culture, then he used everything against us. The veteran paused to take another drink, the thick liquid helping to steady his voice. "My people. The Thracians communicate through chemical signals. Pheromones that carry complex emotional and tactical information. It's instinctive, automatic. You can't help but respond to them. Captain Duyan somehow captured our chemical communications and learned to replicate them." Koliner, the Zephyrian recruit, shifted uncomfortably. "How is that possible?" "'Cause humans study everything," Vexamor said with grudging respect. "While we were focused on winning battles, they were learning languages we didn't even know we spoke. Duyan started flooding our communication networks with panic signals, retreat orders, and false intelligence. But it wasn't random chaos. It was precisely crafted to make us turn on each other." The cantina seemed to grow darker as he spoke, the neon lights flickering like dying stars. I watched a full Thracian battalion tear itself apart because they were receiving conflicting pheromone signals. Brothers in arms suddenly couldn't trust each other. Squad leaders couldn't tell if their orders were real or fabricated. Within hours, we were fighting ourselves as much as we were fighting the humans. Vexamor's metal fingers drummed against the table, creating a rhythm like distant gunfire. But the psychological warfare was just the beginning. They learned our religious practices, then used them as weapons. Private Sumin, a linguistic specialist who looked like she should have been studying ancient texts instead of fighting wars, somehow mastered the sacred burial rituals of the Zephyrian death. Cult. Luz, the crystalline being, pulsed with nervous energy. The death cult doesn't allow outsiders to learn their secrets. It's punishable by execution. "Tell that to Private Sumin," Vexamor replied grimly. "She infiltrated our command ship by convincing our officers she was a returning spirit. Dressed in traditional burial wrappings, speaking ancient Zephyrian dialects that most living Zephyrians had forgotten, performing rituals with perfect precision." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Our senior commanders, hardened warriors, who had faced death 1,000 times, fell to their knees in terror. They thought the gods themselves had sent an angry spirit to punish them for their sins. While they cowered and prayed, Sumin walked through their ship like she owned it, downloading intelligence, sabotaging systems, and planting explosives. The recruits exchanged horrified glances. She could have killed them all while they knelt. In prayer, instead, she left them alive to spread the fear. Within days, every Zephyrian in our fleet was seeing spirits in the shadows, hearing whispers from the dead. Their combat effectiveness dropped to nearly zero. Vexamor leaned back in, his chair the metal creaking under his massive weight. But it was the Ghost Protocol operation that nearly broke our entire fleet, using quantum communicators. The humans made their forces appear simultaneously in 12 different locations across 3 star systems. Our sensors would detect human ships attacking our supply depot on Kepler-4, while simultaneously showing the same ships defending their colony on Delta-7 and somehow also raiding our command base on Arcturus Prime. The veterans' compound eyes reflected the cantina's lights like mirrors of madness. Our commanders started seeing humans everywhere, in shadows, in reflections, in their dreams. Reports came flooding in of human forces that couldn't possibly exist, attacking targets that were light years apart at the exact same time. We began questioning reality itself. Thresh's scales rippled with nervous energy. But quantum communications can't create matter. They can't make ships appear in multiple places. They didn't need to, Veximer explained. They created the perfect illusion by understanding exactly how we gathered and processed information. Every sensor reading, every communication burst. Every piece of intelligence we received was carefully crafted to make us believe we were facing an enemy that defied the laws of physics. He traced more patterns on the table, his metal finger carving deeper grooves in the ancient wood. Captain Duyon had studied our command structure, our decision-making processes, our technological limitations. He knew exactly what evidence we would find convincing, what reports our officers would believe, what fears would paralyze our response. The cantina fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems and the distant sound of ships docking and undocking. I was there when Admiral Krathmer, the most decorated warrior in Thracian history, broke down completely, was convinced that humans had developed godlike powers, that they could bend space and time to their will. He ordered a full retreat from 3 star systems because he thought we were fighting supernatural beings. Veximor's voice became barely audible. That's when I realized the terrible truth. They didn't just fight us. They hunted us like prey animals, using every weakness we didn't even know we had. Every cultural blind spot, every biological limitation, every psychological vulnerability became a weapon in their hands. He looked up at the 3 recruits, his compound eyes burning with remembered terror. We had superior numbers, better technology, more experience. But none of that mattered, because they understood us better than we understood ourselves. They turned our strengths into weaknesses, our instincts into traps, our beliefs into chains. The veteran raised his glass in another mock toast. To Captain Duyon and Private Sumin, Ku taught the galaxy that the most dangerous weapon isn't a plasma cannon or a fusion bomb, it's knowledge. And humans are very, very good at learning things they're not supposed to know. Outside the cantina, the space station continued its eternal rotation, unaware that its occupants were learning why the smartest predators in the galaxy still had nightmares about their encounters with humanity. The Battle of Crimson Nebula was where I truly understood what humans are. Veximer's voice barely carried above the hum of the cantina's life support systems. His massive frame seemed to shrink into itself as he relived the memory that had haunted him for years. Our final push to break them forever, he whispered, staring into the dark depths of his drink, like he could see the battle playing out in the liquid. High Command had decided that enough was enough. They brought in the entire 7th Fleet, 3 dreadnoughts, and the experimental siege platform World Breaker. Over 50,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors, backed by enough firepower to crack a planet. The 3 recruits leaned closer, barely breathing. Around them, the cantina had fallen completely silent. Even the bartender had stopped pretending to clean glasses. The humans had maybe 300 survivors left on that mining colony. 300 against 50,000. Smart play would have been surrender. The sane play would have been evacuation. But humans don't do smart or sane when their backs are against the wall. Veximor's cybernetic arms whirred softly as he gestured, painting invisible pictures of the battle in the smoky air. The nebula itself was their ally. Those crimson gas clouds scattered our sensors made targeting difficult. But we had overwhelming numbers. We could afford to lose ships. We couldn't afford to lose anyone. His compound eyes grew distant, reflecting the neon lights like fragments of a broken mirror. I was aboard the command vessel Iron Talon when we began our final assault. Admiral Korthfell was confident. This wasn't going to be a battle, he said. It was going to be an execution. Clean, quick, decisive. The veteran's laugh was bitter and hollow. Corporal Janae proved him wrong in the most spectacular way possible. 22 years old, engineering specialist, looked like she weighed maybe 50 kilograms soaking wet.
Ow.
Our plasma cannons found her position in the colony's main reactor complex. Direct hit. The kind of blast that doesn't leave anything behind. But vapor and regret. Veximer paused, his metal fingers clenching and unclenching. But somehow, impossibly, she survived the initial impact. Third-degree burns over 80% of her body, internal bleeding, organs failing. Any rational being would have used their last moments to call for help, to say goodbye to loved ones, to find some peace in their final seconds. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Instead, she used those dying moments to manually target our flagship's reactor core. As she bled out on the floor of that burning reactor room, she was calculating trajectory angles, adjusting targeting parameters, and programming the colony's main mining laser for a precision shot that should have been impossible, even for healthy engineers with full computer support. The recruits sat in stunned silence, trying to process the image of someone solving complex mathematical equations while dying. The targeting lock tone started beeping on our bridge. At first, nobody was worried. The colony's defensive systems had been knocked offline hours ago. But that sound kept getting stronger, more insistent. Then our sensors started screaming warnings about an incoming energy signature that was off the charts. Veximer's voice cracked slightly. Corporal Janae fired that mining laser with her last breath, a concentrated beam of coherent energy that punched through our flagship's shields like they were made of paper. She died with her finger on the trigger and a smile on her burned face. Thresh, the young Saurian, shook his head in disbelief. But surely your captain survived? Flagships have escape pods, emergency teleporters. Captain Duyan wasn't on our flagship, Veximer replied grimly. He was leading a fighter squadron in a desperate attack on our command vessel. 30 human fighters against 300 of our best interceptors. Suicide mission by any reasonable standard. The veteran traced more patterns on the table, his metal finger carving deeper grooves in the ancient wood. Doyan's fighter took a direct hit from our point defense systems. Engines dead, life support failing, hull breached in 12 places. He should have ejected, tried to reach the escape pods, called for rescue. Instead, he did something that still gives me nightmares. Compound eyes fixed on each recruit in turn, he injected himself with a biological weapon designed to target our species' nervous systems. Something Medic Yunji had developed using the genetic samples she'd collected during those ceasefire medical treatments. A cocktail of toxins that would be lethal to us, but relatively harmless to humans. The implications hit the recruits like a physical blow. He turned his own body into a delivery system, Veximer continued. Then he pointed his dying fighter at our command vessel and used his last functioning thrusters to ram it into our bridge. The explosion scattered his remains throughout our ship's ventilation system. Within minutes, our entire command staff was convulsing on the deck, choking on air that had become poison. Luz, the crystalline being, pulsed with horrified fascination. He weaponized his own death. But it was watching Medic Yunji that broke something in me, Veximer said, his forearms trembling slightly. I'd assumed she was different from the warriors, gentler, more civilized. Someone who chose to heal instead of harm. His voice became hollow, empty. When Corporal Janae died in her arms, I saw her face change, not into rage or grief, emotions I could understand. It changed into something colder, more focused. Like watching a precision instrument calibrate itself for maximum efficiency, the cantina seemed to grow colder as he spoke. She spent the next 6 hours systematically dismantling our medical facilities from the inside. Not with explosives or weapons, but with surgical precision. She reprogrammed our healing nanobots to attack healthy tissue. She contaminated our medical supplies with compounds that would cause organ failure. She turned our own surgical equipment into instruments of precise destruction. Veximer's voice cracked with remembered horror. The worst part was watching her work. She moved through our medical bay like a dancer, her hands steady, her face calm. She was humming again those same lullabies from before, but now I knew what they really were. They were funeral songs. She was singing our people to their graves. The veteran looked up at the three recruits, his compound eyes burning with truth. That's when I finally understood. They don't fight with anger or hatred, emotions that burn hot and burn out quickly. They fight with love. Love for each other, love for their species, love for their ideals. That love makes them absolutely merciless to anything that threatens what they cherish. He raised his glass one final time, the liquid catching the light like liquid fire. We broke their bodies, but they broke our souls. We won battles, but they won the war by showing us what we really were. Not warriors, not conquerors. It's just another species that had never learned the difference between fighting and dying for something worth protecting. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft sound of Veximer's glass touching the table and the distant hum of the space station's engines carrying them all through the infinite darkness between stars. The silence stretched across the cantina like a heavy blanket. The three young alien recruits sat frozen, their drinks forgotten, on the scratched metal table. Veximer, S-words, hung in the air, settling into their minds like poison app. Single quotes raw. The Calendar recruit with crystalline skin that normally sparkled with confidence found herself dimming to a dull gray. Her four eyes kept darting between Veximer and the human merchant at the bar. The human looked so normal. He had brown hair that needed cutting, wore simple clothes that had seen better days, counted his credits twice before ordering his drink. Nothing about him screamed danger. But Sir Zephyra whispered, her voice barely audible through her translator, "How can you be certain? Maybe that human is just a merchant. Maybe the ones you fought were different somehow." Veximer scarred. Face turned toward her, his artificial I-word as it focused. Different. "Child, let me tell you about different." He sat back down, his metal joints creaking. The cantina's dim lights cast harsh shadows across his battle-worn features. Other patrons continued their conversations, but somehow the air around their table felt separate from the rest of the room. During the war, we captured a human supply ship. Small crew, maybe 8 people. We thought it would be easy. They had a cook, an engineer, 2 cargo handlers, and a few others. Regular folks doing regular jobs. Veximer's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The cook was a grandmother, 67 years old. She baked bread for the crew and kept pictures of her grandchildren on her workstation. The human merchant laughed at something the bartender said. The sound made all 3 recruits jump. When we boarded their ship, that grandmother picked up a plasma cutter and turned it into a weapon. She moved through our boarding party like death itself. Didn't hesitate, didn't show mercy. She carved through 12 of my best soldiers to protect her crew. Veximer touched a scar on his neck. This is from her, a 67-year-old woman who made cookies. Thixel, the insectoid recruit, clicked his mandibles nervously. His compound eyes reflected the cantina's lights like broken mirrors. What happened to her? She died defending the engine room, but not before she killed 18 of my warriors and crippled our boarding ship. We had to retreat. Veximer shook his head slowly. Later we found her personal logs. She talked about missing her grandchildren's birthday party, worried about whether she'd remember to water her garden when she got home. Normal thoughts from a normal person who had just become a walking nightmare. The third recruit, Mordok, from the gas giant colonies, wrapped his tentacles around himself like a protective shield. His skin flushed deep purple with fear. How do they do it? How did they change so completely? Veximer studied the human merchant again. The man was now chatting with another patron about shipping routes and cargo prices. Die! His voice carried the easy warmth of someone who made friends everywhere he went. That's what I spent years trying to understand, Veximer said. I interviewed human prisoners, read their history, studied their psychology. What I found was worse than any nightmare. He leaned forward, and all three recruits unconsciously moved closer. They don't change at all. The capacity for absolute violence lives right alongside their capacity for absolute kindness. Always there, always ready. They don't become monsters, they simply choose to let the monster out when it's needed. The human merchant finished his drink and stood up. He was slightly shorter than average, with a soft belly that suggested he enjoyed good food. His hands looked like they'd never held anything more dangerous than a shipping manifest. On Earth, I met Captain Duyan in his garden. He was teaching a group of human children how to grow vegetables, patient, gentle, laughing when they accidentally uprooted the wrong plants. Svexamor's cybernetic eye tracked the human's movement toward the door. Those same hands that guided children had once strangled 3 of my commandos to death when his position was overrun. The human paused at their table. Up close, his eyes were kind, surrounded by laugh lines. "Evening, folks. Won't seen your species around here before. Welcome to Kepler Station." His smile was genuine and warm. Zephyr managed a weak nod. Thixel-esque. Clicking stopped entirely. Mordok's tentacles curled tighter around himself. "Thanks, Vexamer," replied evenly. "Ain't. Just sharing some war stories with the youngsters." The human's expression shifted slightly, not to anger or suspicion, but to something like understanding. "War's a terrible thing. Hope these kids never have to see one." He patted Zephyr's shoulder gently. "Take care of yourselves." He walked away, humming a tune that sounded like a lullaby. The 3 recruits felt their worldview shatter and rebuild itself. The most dangerous being they'd ever encountered had just wished them well and meant every word of it. "Now you understand," Vexamer said quietly. "Somewhere in this galaxy, there are billions more just like him. Teachers and farmers and artists and shopkeepers. And every single one of them is capable of becoming your worst nightmare if you threaten what they love." The cantina door closed behind the human with a soft hiss. In the silence that followed, 3 young soldiers began to grasp the true meaning of terror.